All I can say is China factor. So people feel very dangerous or a sense of crisis and urgency of doing the recall because we cannot stand for 4 more years of the chaos in the legislature.
A potentially seismic political shift is underway in Taiwan, with several directly elected lawmakers from the opposition Chinese Nationalist Party, or KMT, facing the prospect of early dismissal from office as part of an unprecedented wave of recall votes scheduled for July 26th. This dramatic turn comes after nearly 18 months of parliamentary deadlock, budget cuts and interference with Taiwan's top court, including allegations of collusion with the Chinese Communist Party. Civil society groups, together with the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, are set to oust over 20 opposition lawmakers, which, if successful, could significantly change the balance of power in the parliament. In this first episode in our series on Taiwan's Great Recall, we speak with Professor Chen Fang-Yu from Suzhou University in Taipei to unpack the political tensions and democratic implications behind this extraordinary moment in Asia's leading democracy. Hello and welcome to Perspectives with Nilo. I'm your host, Neil O'Sullivan. If you are new to the podcast, we've got over 60 past episodes waiting for you, and you can explore all of them on our blog at pwnilo.com or by searching for Perspectives with Nilo wherever you get your podcasts. And we'd really appreciate a like, follow or subscribe if you enjoy our content. This is the best way to support us, and thanks in advance for your support. In this episode, we kick off the first part in a series of podcasts on Taiwan's Great Recall, in which we aim to bring you perspectives from all sides of the debate at this important crossroads in Taiwan's democratic journey. As we explained in our previous episode on President Lai's first year in office, while his party, the Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, won the presidential vote in January of 2024, they failed to maintain a majority in the Legislative Yuan, or Parliament. As a result, the Parliament has been controlled by the Chinese Nationalist Party, or KMT, and their smaller ally, the Taiwan People's Party, who, according to opponents, have sought to block the DPP's agenda, freeze or cut budgets, undermine Taiwan's constitutional order, and weaken efforts to bolster defense capabilities against growing Chinese military threats. According to a report by Citizen Congress Watch, a Taiwanese NGO engaged in parliamentary monitoring, in the first session of the current parliament, only a fraction of legislative proposals successfully passed the readings, reflecting low legislative efficiency as a result of the divisive partisan infighting that has taken precedence over advancing policies for public benefit. The KMT insist that they are seeking to strengthen and protect Taiwan's democracy and say these recalls are politically motivated. They accuse the ruling DPP of using recalls to eliminate the opposition. However, not all of the electorate would appear to agree, and a mass recall effort led by civic groups has been underway for months. On June 20th, Taiwan's Election Commission announced a recall vote for 24 KMT lawmakers. That's around 1/4 of the parliament's members, all from the main opposition party. The date for the recall vote has been set for July 26th. In this first episode in our series on Taiwan's Great Recall, we talk to Professor Chen Fang-Yu from the Department of Political Science at Suzhou University in Taipei to understand the history of recall elections in Taiwan and to learn a little more about the recall process. We examine what factors have led to this latest and unprecedented mass recall effort and how Beijing's military pressure on Taiwan and relationship with individual lawmakers is influencing attitudes on the recall. Professor Chen, it's great to meet with you again. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us on the podcast.
Yeah, sure. It's my pleasure.
So last time I spoke with you was at the street protests in front of the Legislative Yuan at Qingdao Road last summer, when protesters were concerned about the legislative reform bills. It seems like a lot has happened in Taiwan politics since then, and the country is heading for what's being called a grand recall. Where many elected politicians can be recalled and removed from office. Hopefully we can talk about some of the details of what has happened to maybe get to this point later in the interview. But maybe first, can you tell us, why is it being called a grand recall? How big a recall is it?
Well, recall is for the district members of a mayor or a legislator in the district. However, this time it's quite unusual because it happens in all of the regions of the KMT's the opposition party's district. So it's more than 30 districts of the legislators are being recalled. So it's called grand recall in every region. Yeah.
Okay. And I believe there are like 3 steps or phases to get to a point when a recall vote can take place for any particular elected official. And it's a 113 seats parliament. So how many potential candidates have made it through in terms of this recall process?
So we have this. We have 76 of the single member district seats in legislature, and another 1/3 of them are the party list, and 6 of them are the Aboriginal ones. So we have 76 in total, and half of them, more than 30 of them, are from the KMT, the opposition party. So almost all of them. Except for 1 or 2, almost all of the districts are being recalled. And we have 3 steps. The first step is the 1% of the electorate, 1% for the petition. And then the second step is within 2 months, 60 days, you have to have 10% of the electorate for the signature. So if you pass this threshold, then we have the third one, and the third step is to vote. And to vote for a successful recall, it requires 25% of electorate vote approve, and then it also requires a simple majority. So we have the three steps and the 3 different thresholds.
So you mentioned there are about 30 of the KMT, Kuomintang, which are the China-friendly party. About 30 of their candidates are going through this recall process. But there also were some DPP candidates, right, that were initially, at least the names were put forward for recall. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, so it is quite interesting that for the grand recall, I think in short, it is civil society's reaction towards the opposition parties, because people are quite angry about how the KMT and also another smaller party, TPP, they cooperate together and to pass a lot of controversial bills, and some of them are ruled as unconstitutional, and then they froze the constitutional court. So people are very angry about that. So there's a grand recall, and then the reactions of the opposition party. I know I'm going to explain that. So the opposition parties, the KMT, they are going to recall the DPP legislator as well, as a reaction to the grand recall. So however, they all failed to the second phase because they did not collect the signature. They do the forgery of the signature. So there are a lot of the cases charged against KMT members because they do the forgery of the signature for the petitions.
So they don't really make it through the 3 steps, basically.
They didn't collect the petition or the signature at all. So they just copy the list and then do the forgery and then send. So some of the members of DPP just passed the first step. But they later then the prosecutor found that it's all forgery, not the true people signed for that petition.
And how about the TPP? This is the smallest party. People are happy with them. No recalls for the TPP.
Yeah, because all of them the 8 seats of the TPP are from party list, so there's no recall for them. It's only for the district one.
Okay, so maybe we'll talk about that party list later on, because just to understand it a bit more. But I want to ask you, we don't often hear about recall elections in democracies. So just for comparison, have there been many recall elections in Taiwan in the past?
Well, in the past, there are only 4 or 5 major recalls in the past decade. Because first, it is very difficult to do the recall. So you have to firstly assign the 10% of the electorate in the second step. It's very, very difficult to pass that threshold. So, and then it is also very difficult to mobilize 20% of the electorate to vote. So it's very difficult to do that. So during the past decade, we only have one major recall is on Kaohsiung City Mayor Han Kuo-yu, who is now the Speaker of Taiwan's legislature. He passed the recall for very, very high votes. And so that is one very unique case. And some other cases for the legislators all failed. Only one success. That is in the KMT stronghold, Taichung, against a small party, Chen Bo-wei. So Chen Bo-wei was recalled because that area, KMT was very, very strong. So they can mobilize a lot of people to against Chen Bo-wei.
So you mentioned Han Kuo-yu there. He was recalled as from the position of mayor of Kaohsiung, right? He became mayor of Kaohsiung, I think, in 2018.
Yeah.
And he was recalled in June 2020. But you mentioned he's now Speaker of the Parliament, right?
Yeah.
And this is why I kind of wanted to just ask about the party list. So because the question would be, how did he get re-elected if he was recalled previously? But he was elected on the party list. So I presume that means he was voted for by members of his party, not by the public. Is that correct?
So the party select the party list members, and then and because in the legislature's election we have two votes, one for the district and another one for the party. So the party will have the distribution of the seats will according to the share of the party votes. So Han Kuo-yu was listed as the first in the party list. So everybody knows that if KMT get the majority, he will become the speaker. So I think there's a gap between the general public opinion and also the gap for the public opinion inside KMT. So KMT still think that Han Kuo-yu is very popular, he's highly welcomed. However, people in Kaohsiung does not think so, because Han Kuo-yu does not do a very good job when he was serving as the mayor.
Yeah, but it's quite fascinating that he can get to such a powerful position now, even that he was recalled previously by the local people, right?
Yeah. So it's different. So if you are so in a district or any kind of levels, if you are recalled from the mayor, so you cannot run again for the mayor, but you can run for another position. It's fine. So for the legislators, if you are recalled, then you cannot run again for the next time. Yeah.
So you mentioned the numbers earlier in terms of these recall candidates, about 30 or so. Mm-hmm. So can I ask you, what is the driving force behind this? Because this obviously takes a lot of organization and work, as you mentioned, to put all this together. So I know there's been various, the political parties are pointing fingers at each other as to who's organizing what. But what is the real story in your mind as to who's driving these recalls?
I have first-hand observations in several areas that almost all of the recall organizations are volunteers, all volunteers. So they are going much ahead of DPP. So in many areas, especially in Taipei and Hsinchu, Keelung, and many areas, they are trying to organize the recall in late last year, I think, because there are just too many controversial bills, especially in December. So they passed, the opposition parties passed several acts, including to freeze the Constitutional Court, and also including a financial act that will take 300 billion budget from the central government to the local government, which is most of them are from KMT mayors. And then it also passed an act to raise the bar of the recall, because KMT knows that somebody was going to do the recall, and then they raise the bar. And then because there's a gap between a new and the old laws of recall, so a lot of people just speed up of organizing to have the first step of recall in early February in order to apply to the old act of the recall, so the older standards. So KMT just raised up the bar and requires a personal ID for the petition and the signature. That will make very difficult for people to join the recall. And so that is why people will just submit the first step in early February.
Yeah, because and that's pretty interesting, because in my own country in Ireland, people often are annoyed by politicians and what they do or what they say, and they may complain a lot, but it's very unusual that people would take action to write a letter or maybe even go as far as this kind of recall action. So, I mean, from your point as a political scientist, right, what makes the situation in Taiwan different, that the ordinary citizens are willing to organize like this and push this effort? Because, I mean, are there, you've mentioned some of the issues that have happened, like the budget and some of the other things, the legislative process changes and so on. But even though my experience is in a lot of Western countries, maybe we're more complacent about democracy. But when these things happen, people may be annoyed, but they don't still do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, why do you think Taiwan is a little different, or why citizens are more involved here on these issues and willing to push for something like a recall?
All I can say is China factor. So people feel very dangerous or a sense of crisis and urgency of doing the recall because we cannot stand for 4 more years of the chaos in the legislature. So that's the short story there. So let me explain that. So it's very normal that there's a divided government in the democracies, no matter it's a presidentialism or parliamentarism. It's quite normal, right? And people demand for more checks and balance and monitoring the ruling parties. So it's quite natural. And then we see the new legislature starting from February 2024. We see there's checks and imbalance. I mean, the legislature, they want to expand their power, which is later ruled as unconstitutional, and then they just cut the government budget for very ridiculous reasons. And with this, and also we see that they are just too pro-China. We see that the party caucus of KMT, Fu Kunqi, brought a group of people, a group of legislators to visit China several times during the session. And he himself has a lot of investment in China and also highly connected to China. People feel very dangerous. Also, we see that the opposition legislatures, they are opposing the budget of military budget and the indigenous submarine project and a lot of that in the committees. So people feel that it's very dangerous because we see a rising threat of China. So we have to do this recall. Just they want to have a reshuffle of the seats in the legislature.
And one of the things that you kind of alluded to earlier was that these parties, KMT and TPP, while they're putting some of these changes and trying to push this legislative reform through, there are big protests on the streets. But they don't seem to pay much attention to that. It seems unusual. If there are, tens of thousands of people on the streets protesting, you would think that would change their, have an impact on their thinking. Am I right in thinking that they just ignore it? Or
this is the most difficult question for me because many people ask the same question, why they don't care. And my puzzle is that even if they have the majorities of seats and they don't even want to follow the procedures of the legislative procedures, and they passed so many controversial bills and they just don't care. I mean, when asking, a lot of journalists ask them, the legislator of the opposition, about whether they care about the people, the mass protests. They just don't care. So that is a puzzle for me because I cannot explain by any kinds of political theories about that. My explanation, the most possible explanation, is that because they are just highly connected to China and the China's all of the resources. So it is a long story that starting from 2 decades ago, especially the local factions of KMT starting to have the connection with China. They receive the funding, the resources from China, and we see that Fu Kunqi, who is the caucus Fu Kunqi, who is from Hualien, is also the so-called local king. I mean, he has a lot of the supply chain of the industry, the tourist industry, connecting to China. So, because your constituencies are not from the local people but from foreign maybe foreign country. That is the most possible explanation, or else I cannot explain why they just don't care. Yeah.
But so I can understand the KMT being pro-China to some extent, but they are in partnership here with the TPP. And, the current leader of the TPP, who is Han Guo-chan, has been very anti-China in the past. So this is another question that seems very difficult to understand, is that how can, the TPP support the KMT when they have such different, would appear to have had different ideologies in the past?
That is another puzzle I cannot explain. Because according to any kind of political theory, it is just anomaly. I mean, for the TPP, they win 8 seats, which is a key minority in the legislature. So according to theory, they can blackmail to both big parties. They can get everything they want. So they can blackmail DPP and also KMT to pass every bills they want, because they have the key minority seats, right? However, they closely attached to KMT, which contradicts to any kind of political theory about that. So it is quite puzzle for me. So again, the explanation is that all members of TPP are just opportunistic. They do not have their core values. So Huang Guochang, now the chair, he was previously anti-KMT, anti-China, anti-Chinese media, also anti-nuclear power. And then he's striving for supporting the nuclear power. So, well, it's quite weird for me to explain that. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is these budget cuts that these parties are pushing through. Apparently, they're trying to push a cut of about 7%. The number 207 billion new Taiwanese dollars, or about 6.3 billion USD. So these are cuts to government agencies. So why? I mean, this is a 7% cut compared to typically maybe 1% would be the average in the past, from what I read. Why are they making so drastic cuts? I mean, what are they planning to do with that money, or why are they cutting the money?
For no reason. So that is why people are angry about that, for no reason. So and for ridiculous reasons. So if you see the proposals of these cuts, it's very ridiculous. For example, there's a funding cut for the Interior Ministry because the opposition party accused the ministry of using a blue color to represent the cold weather. So that is making because the blue color represents KMT, so that it makes the KMT ugly. And also, so it's very weird, right? And also, there's a lot of ridiculous reasons, like, there's a safety issue of the railway. Okay, so I want to cut off the safety maintenance budget for the railway. So they are doing the opposite. So if you want to raise the safety or maintenance, you should increase the budget, not decrease that, right? And also, the procedures are problematic. So all of the fundings or the budgets are going get through the committee in last December. So every items are reviewed by both parties, by all parties, and then just 4 days before the vote again on the budget, they have thousands of proposals to cut with no reason. So they cut about 6 times more than before, and then freeze 20 times more than before. So their purpose, I think, is just to stop, and they want to make chaos for the government, I think. And also they cut the items, not only the amount. So they cut the items for the working items for the government. And you know that the items of the government cannot easily transfer. I mean, the budget of one specific item cannot transfer to another one. So they are aiming to stop some of the institutions of working. Yeah, so that's why people get so angry about that.
And one of the other areas they also want to cut, I think by 3%, is the budget for national security and military spending, which Lai Ching-te wants to increase by 3%. Mm-hmm. They want to cut it by 3%. Mm-hmm. Which is, again, very hard to understand for outsider at a time when China are ramping up their military maneuvers around the island. Why do they want to cut it? It raises very strange questions, right?
I cannot explain. So their reason, I mean, according to the opposition parties, their reason is they want to monitor the use of the funding, but they cut 3%. So there's, I mean, just nonsense to me.
I see. I mean, this whole behavior, though, of throwing parliamentary process aside, not following the parliamentary procedure and the rules and so on, cutting budgets, it does sound like a very authoritarian approach, right? If they're not following the process that the democratic parliament has in place, they're throwing that out the door and doing their own thing. It sounds a little authoritarian. And that, I mean, you've mentioned it already, you know, the influence of China on these parties. You know, what do we know about that? You mentioned the legislators visiting China with Fu Kunqi during a session. Mm-hmm. I guess when your point with that, I presume, is that it's they're more susceptible to influence because they're in the middle of kind of a session doing their work, passing laws. And so this is not probably a good time to be visiting. But apart from that visit to China, is there other evidence that suggests China has infiltrated or has big influence here with these opposition parties?
Well, all of the evidence are not direct, admittedly, because it's very difficult to find out the direct investment or direct revenues coming from China. So China will invest in or infiltrate in some of the media, some of the local organizations. And these local organizations or the third-party organizations can contribute to some of the electoral fundings. So for example, some of the local groups, local temples, or the religious groups, and a lot of the sports groups, and a lot of these local groups can receive funding from outside. And also we see that we guess that some of the legislators, they are quite resourceful. They can bring in a lot of investments, a lot of the local infrastructures, local services, and that requires a lot of money and a lot of labors. But they are, because these legislators, they are not rich. I mean, they do not run their big company so where are their resources from? So that is quite interesting. And also there's some evidence that from some of my friends who are doing the informational warfare studies, they find it sometimes the legislator will use some of the arguments very similar from the Chinese media or something like that. So we guess that there is
but does Taiwan not have laws to regulate external investment into the country?
Yeah, sure, but there are some of the loopholes there. So they can just doing that from the third party and also from local groups. So these groups may not be directly linked to China. So it's very difficult to detect. But we are going to implement some of the laws recently, and we do find some of the cases, but still not enough to detect some of the the legislator. So for example, I come up with an example that people find that some companies making the souvenirs or some smaller documents, the advertisement for the legislator are highly connected to China. But we do not have direct linkage from the Chinese side and the legislator. So it is a local company, a commercial company, but they do a lot of things from China or buy a lot of goods from China. And then that company doing some business for the legislator, but there's still no direct linkage.
I see. I suppose if you were to play devil's advocate, though, and ask Fu Kunqi, okay, he takes legislators to China, he may say that, well, he's trying to build cross-strait links. This is good to stop the situation or the tension, the cross-strait tension rising up. What would you say to that type of position?
Well, they are always saying this, but actually we welcome any kinds of exchanges like that, but we don't welcome the exchanges with purpose. So it's very clear that China is going to do some united front works to this. It will provide some of the benefit to this legislator, and then these legislators did propose some of the proposals for China. So after the visit last April, I think, Fu Kunqi and the party, they proposed some of the bills that proposed by China. I mean, that is for the tourists, some of the proposals. So it's quite weird. So and also we see that well, we welcome the visit, but you should at least register for that, because we have the registration. We require the registration for our officials and our even the public servants to register if you want to go to a foreign country, but not required for the legislators going to China. So it's very weird again. Yeah.
So another question kind of related to the KMT and China is, just for international listeners who may not be as familiar with Taiwan politics. In the past, the CCP and the KMT fought a war. They fought a civil war. That's why the KMT came to Taiwan. So aren't they enemies? Why would their position have changed in the intervening years?
That is another puzzle for me, and very, very frequently asked question. So, long time ago, when Taiwan is still in the authoritarian era, then the KMT, they think that they are going back and fight against CCP and take over the mainland China again. That is an authentic ROC, the Republic of China ideology. So we are the authentic China that time. And then gradually, I think people in Taiwan, or those people, those pan-blue people, pro-China people, they starting to see a rise of China. They are now maybe their core value is still the Chinese nationalism. So they want to go back to China again. So they see the Taiwanese identity as their enemy right now, because they do not want to be Taiwanese something. So there's a small part of people like this. And some people are just interest oriented. So two decades ago, in 2005, when the KMT was defeated by DPP the second time by Chen, so the chairman Lian Zhan just went to China and started the CCP and KMT cooperation, because they eager to win. They want to win in the election, so they choose to cooperate with CCP. And CCP is very smart. They provided them with a lot of beneficial policies. So CCP is a united front work. Is that, okay, if you cooperate with me, then I will provide with you a lot of beneficial policies, like providing a lot of Taiwanese people's opportunities to work there, study there, or investment there, and then to attract people to vote for KMT, which is a pro-China party. So KMT, just right now, they know that cooperation with China will have a lot of benefits. So they tend not to see them as a threat. Yeah.
Okay. So back to the recall process. Earlier you'd mentioned about KMT candidates being recalled. And also there were some DPP candidates. You mentioned forgery of signatures and things like that. I believe that the chairman of the KMT, Eric Chu, criticized President Lai of the DPP for some of the issues that were going on with the DPP recalls and the investigation that went on those recall signatures. Unfortunately, Eric Chu didn't use very good terminology, and he fell in for criticism from the German office and many other foreign affairs offices in Taiwan, or foreign trade offices in Taiwan. Can you tell us about this story and Eric Chu's faux pas?
Well. So Eric Chu and the whole KMT, they accuse Lai Ching as a dictator, and accuse DPP as the dictatorship right now.
This was because of something President Lai said.
Not only for this. So they accuse of DPP as a dictatorship for a very long time.
Oh, I see.
So and also they accuse Lai Ching right now, and also because of the prosecutions charged for some several cases of forgery, and then they are very angry about that. It makes no sense for me, because you cannot do the forgery, right? But still, the KMT and Eric Chu accuse Lai Ching as a Nazi, and accuse the DPP as a Nazi. And then the German institute in Taiwan, in Taipei, the de facto embassy, I think, just accused of KMT and Eric Chu. It's quite rare to have to a foreign embassy to accuse of the opposition parties here, because you cannot just rationalize the Nazi by accusing a democracy like that. So you are just maybe some to justify or lower the levels of the Nazi. So and also it concerns a lot because recently the rhetorics is used by Mr. Putin and Xi Jinping. So Mr. Putin and Xi Jinping just accused Ukraine as a Nazi and then just invading that. so it's the rhetoric is very dangerous. So you can see that not only for the German Institute in Taiwan, also European Unions, a lot of countries, several countries, 7 or 8 countries accused KMT as well. However, KMT just respond with very strong words, accuse Germany of not doing transitional justice. It's so ridiculous because KMT is a former authoritarian party which is not undergoing any kind of transitional justice, so they can now speak very loud about this. So it's, for me, it's very weird. Everything is very weird. But
so Ep1 didn't back down or offer any apology. He just dug his heels in.
He didn't. Yeah. So it makes no sense for me because they strive for their right to forgery. By accusing others of Nazi and then fight against not only Germany, the EU, and also several countries, including Israel, UK, Swedish, a lot of countries. So, well, I just cannot understand about this.
So back to the budget then, and in particular the military budget. It was reported by Reuters that the Trump administration may sell more arms to Taiwan. And as a result of that, US officials have been urging the KMT to support the budget increase. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the KMT will be convinced by the US to increase the budget for military spending?
No, they will not. Unfortunately, they will not. Because in the very long time, in the past several years, they are opposing the military budget. Because their rhetoric is that, if we increase that, it will anger China, and then China will attack us. It's always like their mobilization, their languages for the local elections, all this. So their language, like the U.S. collaborating some of the plot with the DPP and to make money for their military industry, and then it will make us unsafe. So it's all their language. It's a theory of them. It's the worldview of KMT. However, they send some of their representatives speaking English to the English-speaking world that, they support the military budget, they support the self-defense capabilities. You cannot deceive everyone because you see AIT people, they are all very good at Mandarin, right? And also the international journals will report, right? So I don't think they will change the attitude. Even the U.S. Send a very strong message there. You also see the U.S. senators speaking very strong message to KMT, urging them not to block the military budget. But I don't think they will change their attitudes.
So how is the whole recall then? How do you think this will play out? And I ask this from the point of view, well, if the KMT are the most impacted party, and they aren't following parliamentary process on normal issues, normal business all along, do you think they'll accept these results if people vote to recall them en masse? Do you think they'll accept it? Or do you think they might respond in a hostile way? How do you see the whole thing playing out?
Well, we have about 30 seats into the second phase, and then about 20 or 25 will enter the third phase. So it is quite amazing outcome. And then among these 20 or 25, I think about 10 will be passed. 10 will pass the threshold of the recall. However, the key is the by-election. So after the recall, then there will be a by-election in 2 months. So it's still very difficult for DPP to win the by-election. For example, in Taipei.
So in other words, in the by-election, another KMT representative could be elected rather than the one who was just recalled.
Yes, especially in Taipei City. So in the KMT stronghold areas. However, I do think that it is quite possible that another KMT. So the slogan of the organizations of the recall, they urge KMT people to vote yes because they want to replace these the current ones who are just too pro-China and do not want to follow the procedures. I don't know. I'm not sure whether the next one will be better, but maybe it's a big warning for them already. Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose final question then. There's been some big rallies in Taipei in particular regarding this grand recall. I think the KMT had a big rally, but so did the recall movement. And there was one social media post that went viral from one of those rallies. It was a picture showing a Taiwan independence flag and an ROC flag side by side. And a lot of people, I guess, got very excited by this because it kind of shows some uniting of different sides on this issue. I'm sure you're familiar with the photograph. We can show it on our blog. But can you tell me what your reading of that situation is? Is that a light at the end of the tunnel in all of this kind of stuff that's going on? Or is it just a photograph?
I think it's complicated. So I think there's a positive message there. So people from different positions of the ideology spectrum can cooperate together. So let me explain briefly about that. So ROC flag, which is seen as a representative of our national flag, official one, is not disliked by many pro-Taiwan or pro-Taiwan independence people because that flag represents a long-term rule by KMT. Because on the flag there is a KMT flag there also. Not really the KMT flag, but very similar. So we the country originated from the KMT authoritarian rule, right? Mm-hmm. So people want to have a new one. So people just dislike that because we have undergone 40 years of the white terror, the martial law. So that flag also represents the old days, cruel and the authoritarian rule. So the pro-Taiwanese people, pro-Taiwan independent people use the flag for another flags, and they do not show the flag there. However, this time the grand recall, it purposely, some of the volunteer organizations, they purposely find different groups of people because we know that it's very difficult to mobilize. And we find a common factor, that is anti-communist, anti-China. So because we feel the crisis there, we urge people to vote against the legislators who are too pro-China. So that is a common factor for the pro-Taiwanese independent people and the previously pro-blue or pro-KMT people. They try to find some common factor there. So it is a good strategy for me. However, for the long term, it may not still complicated because in the long run, I mean, pro-Taiwan people still want to make more. It's a flag or some symbol that represents Taiwan, not the old one. But right now, because we want to do the recall, we have to put the national flag in the middle or something in the central role. So that is complicated, but I see a generally positive.
That's Professor Chen Fang-Yu from the Department of Political Science at Suzhou University in Taipei, speaking with me recently. My sincere thanks to Professor Chen for sharing his valuable insights with us on Perspectives with Nilo. As usual, we've linked additional information on all of the topics discussed in the Dive Deeper section of our blog, which you can find at pwnilo.com. In upcoming episodes on this topic, we will be talking to some of the civic groups involved in promoting the recall, as well as to participants at a recent KMT anti-recall rally in Taipei. So make sure to stay tuned for that. It is worth noting also that for these recalls to be successful, the number of votes approving the recall measure must be more than those opposing it, and also must exceed 1/4 of the number of registered voters in the constituency in question. So turnout will be important. It will be interesting, therefore, to hear directly from civic groups and the public on both sides of the debate. We would also love to hear your feedback on this topic, and so feel free to leave your comments on our social media pages or on the Perspectives with Nilo page on your favorite podcast app. We're also posting additional video content on Instagram and YouTube, so make sure you are subscribed to Perspectives with Nilo on all of these platforms so you don't miss out. But that's where we leave it for now. As always, thank you for listening, and until the next time, from Taipei, Taiwan, 再见.